Welcome to empowerME Conversations, a podcast from the Atlantic Council. This show brings you leaders from business and government shaping the future of Middle East economies. I'm your host, Amjad Ahmad, Chairman of the empowerME Initiative. Let's get started. Egypt, like other countries in the Middle East, is seeking to boost private sector growth, entrepreneurship, and women's economic inclusion to create jobs for the future. As the most populous country in the region, with over 100 million people, Egypt has significant advantages, including a large local consumer market, broad talent pool, diversified economy, a vibrant equity market, and a high mobile penetration rate approaching 100% of the population. To reach its full potential, Egypt must address its critical challenges, including reducing the state's role in the economy, lowering business costs and barriers, accelerating the momentum in entrepreneurship, and balancing fiscal and monetary policies to navigate an expected global slowdown or possible recession. I'm delighted to have with me Her Excellency Rania Al-Mashat, Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation, to discuss Egypt's economic opportunities and challenges and specific initiatives she's leading. She was formerly Egypt's first female Minister of Tourism. Before that, she was advisor to the chief economist of the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Amjad and Lil Penny.
I'm also joined today by a special guest host, UPS President for International Public Affairs and Sustainability, Penny Naas. Penny has been with UPS since 2012 and has led operations in over 200 countries throughout her career. UPS has been a great supporter of the Empower Middle East initiative at the Atlantic Council, backing important projects like this podcast and our WIN Fellowship, which aims to support women entrepreneurs and future leaders. Welcome, Penny.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Your Excellency, it's great to see you. My first question is: the world is facing, many challenges with rising inflation, rising interest rates, a slowing global economy, possibly a recession, as I said prior. We experienced a dramatic and uncertain pandemic. Economies are struggling with the aftermath in many ways. Where's Egypt today in your perspective? And what are the priorities for you in the near to midterm?
Thank you, Amjad. Yes, absolutely. The global context keeps on reshaping. We thought that at the beginning of 2020, as the pandemic hit, that was going to be the crisis that shapes what's going on. And then as we were recovering towards the end of 2021, I think the world was on a certain path. And then all of us, of course, during the first quarter of 2022, got a bit, surprised by this additional shock. This shock is one which includes food, fuel, fertilizer, and financing. So for emerging economies that have been trying to push ahead with their development programs. And here I want to go back to 2015, when countries put together a common denominator, which are the 17 SDGs. And between 2015 2020, a lot of work, a lot of national strategies, a lot of partnerships with the world, both multilateral development banks, private sector. Everyone was trying to see how we can translate the 2030 vision into projects on the ground to create employment and so forth. And then 2020 started. There was a decade till 2030. Then the pandemic created a shock for different economies. What was very useful in our case, we had concluded an IMF program at the time. It was between 2016 2019, and you mentioned in your earlier remarks, monetary and fiscal policy are the two very important pillars for an economy to move forward. So we entered 2020 with cushions both on the fiscal side and the monetary side. We never had a lockdown. We continued to work, and that's why the economy was growing. One of the economies, or the only economies in the Middle East that was growing during the pandemic. Why am I giving this background? Because what we have learned is that in order to be resilient, reform is a continuous process. And despite the pandemic and despite the challenges, given the focus on the green economy, Egypt was the first country in the Middle East and North Africa, or in Africa, to issue a green bond in September 21. So this was again, and when you say a green bond, the green bonds are anchored on projects that have very clear outcomes related to climate action, be them sustainable infrastructure, water waste management, transportation, renewables, and so forth. So this was the pandemic was there, but we were innovative in financing tools. And at the end of 2021, tourism was coming back, and the economy was pushing forward. And then first quarter of 2022 is a different one. Just a few facts, and here I just want to make one comment, because Egypt is known to be a big importer of wheat, actually the largest in the world. And when the crisis happened, many of the reports from the FT, from the Economist, made it sound as if the situation is a very dire one. And here I want to mention a few things that also happened, where we stand on the wheat situation, and it links to the work of the ministry. A few years ago, starting 2014, for the very first time, Egypt invested in silos. Silos for wheat storage. These could be considered adaptation projects, because you are increasing agricultural resilience and also food security for citizens. And this allowed us to, for the very first time, as these projects came to fruition, to actually store the wheat that we import. The second is, as part of the development plans that I was speaking about and the SDG movement, more arable land, agricultural land was added for wheat production. So today we are actually, half of what we consume is locally produced. So yes, this is a shock for the country, but it is not a case of panic, because sometimes the readings make it sound as if it's a panic, and I want to make that distinction. It's an exogenous shock. We're dealing with it. We do have storage capacity. We have a strategic stock that is keeping us till the end of the year. So this has all been very, very positive when it comes to the shock impact on price and so forth. With respect to economic growth, of course, what's happening globally has implications on emerging markets. Nonetheless, as you mentioned also early in your comments, this is a very vibrant economy. It's very diversified, and it's very young. Startups, SMEs, entrepreneurship play a very big role in our economy. The statistics that are coming out are ones which are very, very favorable. And there's a lot of interest in pouring in more investments into this ecosystem, because the multiples at the end are quite sizable. I'll stop there and then continue with your questions.
No, that's a great last point. And I recently wrote an article about how the emerging market capital pool is shrinking, which means that competition for that pool is going to increase. And Egypt, I know, has been working very hard, and you're spearheading that as the Minister of International Cooperation. When you see attracting that capital from outside, what do you think are the priorities for you in attracting that capital? Because the competition now will definitely increase for that capital. A lot of emerging markets are going to be fighting for that smaller pool. From your perspective, and you've been doing this for a while, what are those key things that you think are going to attract this pool of capital to come to Egypt?
I think the results. You take a look at the startups that were initiated a few years ago. Look at where they are today. So in this space, the best way to market yourself is with the results that came that have been progressing. And you take a look at the startups, whether they're digital, fintech, in terms of retail and consumer, all of them have been very, very innovative. They are also in line with latest consumption trends. Whenever you're doing a survey in any, and I'm an economist by training, you need to have a big sample. So 100 million. So this is a natural a natural sample of habits, trends, it's the experimentation, the cost of experimentation compared to other places is quite low. And therefore, it's a very attractive market. In addition to that come the talent. In addition to that comes the exposure with neighboring countries and with the continent. So there are many advantage points that have helped us. There's also a lot of commitment, not just from the government, but also from the private sector that has been experimenting with incubators, with pushing risk capital and venture capital into these startups. Nonetheless, we're trying to increase that pool. And a key point is to market more and to make the success stories quite known. And let me here mention COP27, because we're doing a global competition for startups when it comes to green solutions. And adaptation is a key element for Africa. So we will be sending out this call for the global competition, hoping to showcase successes, not just in the Egypt case, but also globally and particularly for Africa.
Well, I know COP27 is very important to Penny, so I'm going to punt this over to her because sustainability is key to UPS. So please, Penny.
It is. It's a very important topic, and we're looking forward to coming to COP27 in November. I'd love to hear a little bit more. The global competition you just discussed sounds amazing, but it seems to me, given some of the things we're seeing in the world, we need to be accelerating efforts with regards to climate change. And what I would love to hear is, what are your thoughts about what we can achieve at COP27, building on previous COPs to help accelerate and particularly to focus on the most important issues moving forward?
For those who have not attended COPs, and COP26 was my first one, it is one of the most engaging conferences globally. And it's because the level of the number of stakeholders in this space is quite sizable. And so the governments are there, private sectors there, NGOs, civil society, youth, gender. So it's a very important. When we say what is multilateralism, that is really it. The reason why I mention this is Glasgow provided, I think, a renewed image for COPs, because private sector was there in a very notable and vivid way. The pledges that were made out of the private sector were extremely important. And what we want this COP to be, it's a continuation of Glasgow, and that's why the two presidencies work. That's the nature of the different transitions between one COP and the other. But what we want this COP to be about is from adaptation and resilience being very, very important. And this is because this is the voice of the South. COP27 is in Africa, and the G20 is in Indonesia. So we have two big multilateral gatherings which are in countries in the South. So the voice of the South, what is it that countries are requiring? So adaptation and resilience are extremely important, and they come more in focus because of the food security issue that is on the back of what we're seeing in Europe. Also, the energy transition and how today the challenges that are happening in the developed world have been existing for the developing economies for some time. So the backdrop today is very different than in November 2021. So there's going to be a very interesting discussion pushing forward. But adaptation, resilience, important. The second is from pledges to implementation. So much has been pledged in Glasgow. What we want this COP to be about is about implementation. And that's why we are encouraging countries, including ourselves, and that's what we're doing, is to present investable projects so that we can basically see how these trillions can become billions. Billions on the ground. So this COP is an implementation COP, and then everything else around it: loss and damage, of course, gender, and startups and youth, more awareness on climate not being an isolated theme anymore. It's integrated into national strategies. So in our case, we have our 2030 strategy having green projects. We issued our 2050 country climate strategy, which includes projects between now and 2050 that could be implemented with the private sector. So there are these investable opportunities which would create jobs for the people, which would create skills, green skills, and so forth. Maybe in terms of what the ministry does, we deal with all IFIs with the exclusion of the IMF. So our ODA portfolio, the country's official development assistance portfolio, is at any moment around $25 billion, and it includes mitigation and adaptation projects. So how can we enhance that, push that further? How can we see the pledges making their way into projects? Let me, maybe because private sector is important in this conversation, private sector is very used to investing in mitigation projects. And in Davos and other forums, we ask the private sector, what about adaptation? Countries need more when it comes to water, when it comes to communities, when it comes to food security, agriculture. And the point that the private sector makes is, well, we are able to benchmark against metrics related to mitigation, how much CO2 emissions. But for adaptation, we're not very sure what we are benchmarking against. So this would be another very important item to engage with the private sector on how the adaptation story can be one that they can participate in more. And that also adds to this concept from pledges to implementation.
And in terms of that energy transition, where do you see as the ideal mix for Egypt going forward? What are the big investable projects that make sense given Egypt's positioning, your competitive advantage? What makes sense?
So, let me go. Sorry, I go back a little bit in history because it's important. In 2015, we issued our integrated sustainable energy strategy, and it includes KPIs for renewables, both wind farms and solar plants. And we said by 2035, 40% of our energy mix would be renewables. We're ahead of schedule, and what has happened is that there have been very important investments in renewables, wind and solar, which we are very gifted with. And having this renewable stock, if you will, makes us ready for the green hydrogen market. And given the needs in Europe today and the proximity and the networks that we already have established, this is going to be the next big investable space. And the other is, and when you take you go back a little bit, we had an energy deficiency in 2011 till 2013, 14. We used to be deficient in electricity. Today we have a surplus of electricity, and we're able to do regional integration with neighboring countries. So I think the investments in renewables, given the need for cleaner energy and the trying to substitute different sources of energy for Europe, this is going to be a very important opportunity. And we're already in discussions with the EU and other partners on different projects there. And during COP, hopefully, we will also be showcasing some of the work we're doing. The other, a country of 100 million, there are always different needs, but the focus on sustainable infrastructure is quite important. And we've seen this in, plans for electric vehicles already, different metro lines. And for example, just to give a scale, the metro in Egypt, there are 3 million citizens using just the metro per day. So this is, how many cars off the roads, how much CO2 emissions coming down. That's in addition to the railway. In addition to this, water is so important to us. So a lot of investments in water waste management plants. Water desalination is going to be another big opportunity for private sector investments, and trying to get this technology correct, implemented, because the private sector are the ones who implement water desalination plants. The government is the customer. So this is another big opportunity going forward.
Can I follow up on that just to ask you a supply chain question? So Egypt sits at the crossroads, a very important crossroads. with regards to your waterways and connecting, the east to the west. I'm just curious, as you think about climate, but also as you think about what we've seen in the fragility of supply chains and the infrastructure there, how are you all thinking about, supply chains and the role in particular, a very important role Egypt plays in terms of maintaining supply chains?
I mean, this is this discussion has been, going on since 2020, and this idea of regionalization and how we can, are we going from a global situation to a regional situation? I think we're not at equilibrium yet. I mean, to be able to dismantle the what has been very much set up and entrenched for many years is not as easy as everybody thought at the beginning of 2020. The global supply chain is a very strong one, and it also has cost implications for consumers. Nonetheless, regional partnerships are important, and given our we're in the African continent, and given the different trade agreements and the different, the Africa free trade, the Continental Free Trade Agreement, and so forth. But Egypt, as you mentioned, is quite well situated with the Suez Canal, so there's that item. Also, we have with Europe the ability to transport our gas, and this is something that we've been engaged in recently. We also have the regional gas forum, where us, Cyprus, Greece, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and then international observers, the US, World Bank. And so today we are able to, import the gas from Israel, liquefied because we have liquefaction capabilities, and then re-export to Europe. So these regional modalities have been able to serve, if you will, in times of crisis such as these. We need to do more of that, but I think it's taking more heavy lifting than what the rhetoric was in 2020. But the realities on the ground in this changing global dynamic is pushing countries to try and be as innovative as possible.
So with that said, you mentioned the wheat situation as a great example. Do you see more countries, I guess, in a way, making their supply chains more resilient at a cost to localize them? I mean, or is there going to be more regionalization? And what I mean by that, cooperation between yourselves and Saudi and UAE and others to do more of a regional footprint. We've heard different things, localize, regionalize, globalize. Where do you see that balance going forward? It's obviously going to come at a higher cost, right? But I guess it's at the cost of resiliency.
Yeah, no, I think it's taking place, and it's not, they're not all mutually exclusive. There are certain things that you can localize, but in order to localize, you need to have a level playing field. You need to be able to invite the private companies that have the technology, so that when you're localizing with sense, you're localizing with value add. So that's one. Regionally, it's quite also important, and it's also happening. But then you look at the comparative advantage. So all I'm trying to say is you cannot eliminate one completely. There will continue to be trials, some on the regional level, some on the localized level, and it's different from country to country. In the globalized world, it's Ricardian economics holds, and you where you have a comparative advantage, you basically emphasize. But today, with the move to regionalization, as you mentioned, it might come at a higher cost, but it gives you more sustainability, if you will. But I think we have not reached an equilibrium. There's a reshaping that is taking place, and every country is trying its best. But the challenges with these shocks, put sands in the wheels. So as you were, I don't know, inviting private capital for one sector, then suddenly Private investments are becoming tight because of the global tightening. So, it's as I mentioned, it's still being worked out, and we're not at equilibrium yet.
Yeah, and as you said, the global realities change things. I mean, I think Biden is about to take off the Chinese tariffs. So, it's just the reality because of inflation, right? We need to rely on China again. So, it's a very interesting. Um,
Can I ask a quick
Shifting,
question just to follow up
please,
on that?
Pam.
So as you think about the move from, potentially globalization, which I still think is an incredibly important trend and is there may be certain politics that come into play, but the power of the economics will still continue to be there. But as we think about some other things about trade and about where we've been, how do we ensure that as we move forward, we are more inclusive in terms of how we establish and set up our trade systems? And I know Egypt's doing quite a bit with regards to ensuring that, for example, female entrepreneurs are included and maybe receive even some additional assistance just to take into account certain societal differences or cultural differences. But I'm just curious, how are you all thinking about this, and how are you thinking about how to ensure that as we come back from where we've been the past few years and even before, we come back even better or more inclusive?
Yeah, I think there are three words that shape what every country is trying to do now, to do on a national level, and to do in terms of its partnership, whether with the private sector or with IFIs, is an inclusive economy, a digital economy, and a green economy. And the three are very much linked. If you have the digital skills, you are able to move in the green space and being more inclusive. If you focus on green projects, you need the technology, so you're digital and inclusive. So I think there's a realization and an awareness that to be relevant and to be, as Amjad was mentioning, there's a lot of competition globally. So to be there, you need to promote these three principles. And in our case, given the size of the country and given the amount of reform efforts, and for us, reform is a continuous process, there's a strategy for women empowerment, which includes digital skills. And therefore, you have that space for more female entrepreneurs, for instance. There's a climate strategy, so you have green projects, which then entail technologies and digital skills and inclusion of both men and women, particularly given adaptation. And women are more catalysts of change in their local communities. So it's these three words to me are really what countries that want to stay relevant at this moment focus on. And when I think of Egypt, I can see through the different strategies that define our work as cabinet members with the international community, and be it including, of course, private sector and as well as civil society.
To pull on that string, I know you've made several moves to ensure that women are represented at the leadership level in Egypt, which I think is critical to actually increasing also the women participation at the lower levels. How do you see that continuing to play out? I know the central bank came out and said, you have to have women board members. Do you see that starting to permeate through other sectors in Egypt? And are there things that you're working on to further facilitate that?
Yeah, well, it's I mean, women participation is also a function of so you have to have the vision, the commitment from government. And once that happens, culture starts to change. And why do I say this? Because when women are in leadership positions and they do well, it becomes more familiar. It doesn't become unusual. So that's why when more women are put in leadership positions, it's just a way to keep on changing the culture in moving forwards. And that is so. For example, in our case in Egypt, Women have always been working very much in government space, but maybe not at high levels. Today, when you have them at leadership levels, it becomes. So I was the first female minister of tourism. Today, if there's another female minister of tourism, it is not unfamiliar. And similarly for many other portfolios. So I believe that political commitment is very important in terms of what we are doing as Ministry of International Cooperation with the World Economic Forum and the National Council for Women. We launched Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator, which we're the first country in North Africa and the Middle East. And basically it has three principles: increasing women in leadership positions, pushing for equal remuneration, and pushing also for digital skills. And what this platform has been very useful for, because I think Penny had mentioned, and Amjad, that there's a lot of interest in inclusivity, and therefore more money pouring into the space of promoting gender activities, SMEs for women, digital skills for women, women in trade. So this platform has been very nice in trying to streamline all the support that's coming so that it's linked to what the KPIs we want to achieve. So it's a very nice way to reduce redundancies, to push the message more forcefully, and to have a platform for those who want to participate in trying to to create more inclusivity. This is where you can come. This is where you can see all the projects. And I invite everyone to check out our website, where we have done a mapping of the official development assistance, the ODA, to SDGs. So SDG 5 is there. You press on that. You see where these projects are on Egypt's map, who are the development partners, and what these projects are about.
Is that the website for your ministry?
Yes, it's
okay. We'll put it in the show notes just to make sure people can reach it.
Fantastic.
Sort of the last few minutes, I wanted to focus on this, and I know you've been a big advocate for entrepreneurship and the private sector. We've heard different announcements about further privatizations in Egypt. I'm assuming that's going to continue going forward. How do you view that in terms of someone who tries to push for a lot of international cooperation? We hear different things about Egypt and other countries in the region where, the state is a little bit too involved in the private sector. Do you see more reforms coming in that manner to give more room for the private sector and for entrepreneurship to sort of spur more activity and be more dynamic?
So a few things. Egypt went through, a very important political and economic transformation in 2011, and since then, over these past few years, there was like a catch-up phase, catching up on infrastructure that needed to be done, catching up on, and when we say infrastructure, it's sustainable infrastructure. So it's the transportation, it's the renewables, it's the water waste management, it's the social housing, it's natural gas to households, it's more social solidarity packages. So when COVID took place, we were able to increase, the support to the most vulnerable. So all of these necessary investments had to be pushed by the state, had to be initiated. And when you take a look at many of these projects, they have been implemented by private sector, but there was this move to, we need to really push all of this to create two things. First, to push the frontiers of the economy. So if I'm, looking at the PPF, you want to push the frontier of the economy through better networks of communication, through better energy, through better skilled labor and citizens, healthier citizens. So there's been many initiatives on. Today we have eliminated hepatitis C from the country, which was a very chronic problem for several years. So this was a necessary period. What is happening now, and just last month, the government issued a document about the exit of the state from different sectors. The sectors have been identified. There's a timetable. So there is a realization that there was a period of necessity to be able to push the frontiers of the economy. A lot of employment was created. Many private sector companies that are involved with us, that were involved in these big projects, today are doing the same in African countries. So there was a capacity building for Egyptian private sector companies because they were, started small, but given the size and scale, they were also able to grow. So there is a realization and a move to more exiting from different sectors, and there's currently a societal dialogue around this document. For COP, we have a list of projects. They're called the Nexus for Water, Food, and Energy. In Arabic, Nuwafi, which means from pledges to implementation. And these are projects where both mitigation, adaptation, where the private sector is invited to participate as well.
I love this focus on execution and implementation. You don't hear that often from government, so it's great to see that focus on actually implementing and not just announcing new projects. It's great. And the next COP is also in the Middle East, so should be very exciting going forward. Penny, I want to give you the last word, so please.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we started the podcast kind of talking about a lot of the things that are going on in the world today, many of which are probably not so positive that we're working through. And Minister, just hearing you speak, I feel a bit more optimistic coming out of this podcast. So I just wanted to ask you, where does your optimism come from with regards to the work you're doing and the things you've got going on?
Oh boy. For those who follow me on Instagram, I have quotes that I come up with every now and then. And I think that once I said, it's not being optimistic or pessimistic. We just have to keep on working. So I think that, the every day brings to us, so many new things to think about. And, we've been tested in terms of our agility. I think 2020 was a very big test for everyone. We had to adjust. We had to adjust the way we work, the way we think, the way we engage with each other and with the world, and the way we can become sympathetic or empathetic, if you will. So this country is a big country. It's been through a lot, but the shocks have been different in nature, have been different in scale. But we continue to move ahead with a very committed reform agenda, which is based on our exposure to the world. So my optimism or my positivity comes from the amount of engagement that takes place, but also I look at the country and what has been achieved over the past few years in different sectors, in different ways, against different odds. And it makes me very proud as an Egyptian citizen, and also quite happy that I'm part of contributing, given my different mandates, whether Minister of Tourism at a certain time or today, in trying to push these objectives and this vision forward. So, as Ministry of International Cooperation, we work with bilaterals and multilateral institutions. It's about financing, but financing with impact. It's financing that is related to projects. So when Amjad says implementation, we see each and every, yesterday we were inaugurating a metro line, a station that includes a railway and metro, and it's done financed by EIB and the Chinese and AFD. So it's a multilateral, an example of multilateralism that is serving so many people and connecting new cities. So this is real. So I think if anyone is feeling a little bit down, just come and visit some of our projects here in Egypt. You will feel very rewarded, and you also feel that you can have an impact. You engage for impact, and that's what our motto is.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you for your time. You've been really generous as usual, and your answers have been frank and straightforward, which we love. We just want to wish you lots of luck with COP27. I know it's going to be a big job, but you're the right person for the task. So looking forward to it. And Penny, thank you so much for co-hosting. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. And Minister, real pleasure.
Thank you. We're waiting for all of you in Sharm el-Sheikh, the city of peace.
Absolutely.
I think that the challenge is going to have people inside the conference room between the beach and the sea and the and the snorkeling, and there's a museum. So let's see. But hopefully it's a successful COP, one that really voices what developing countries in Africa wants from this energy transition.
Absolutely. And best diving in the world, I have to say. So thanks again, Your Excellency. Wishing you all the best. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to empowerME Conversations and rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. For updates on our work, follow us on LinkedIn and at AC Mideast on Twitter, or visit atlanticcouncil.org.